Is this thing on? In the context of international relations, the international political system, the dominating sort of theory, at least in Western cultures for the last 70 plus years, was liberal internationalism, which isn't necessarily just promotion of sort of liberal social values of tolerance and support for non heteronormative behavior. It's been part of it, but it's not been the primary aspect of liberal internationalism. To define liberal internationalism, what you need to do is suggest democracy is generally preferable to prevent international conflict, and trade and movement of people is generally preferable to prevent international conflict. The idea behind it is having an interdependency where states are building economies with one another and trading peoples with one another allows for the likelihood of not participating in conflict between states. It creates an interdependency where there's relational aspects that it's less popular to get involved with conflict, with military action. Now, the primary sort of prestigious theory within liberal internationalism in the international political system is democratic peace theory. This idea that countries that are democracies rarely, if ever, invade each other, rarely, if ever, engage in military action that involves significant casualties. There's still external influences in the international political system between democracies that sort of undermines the sovereignty of the nations sometimes, but to the degree of invasion, to the degree of military action, the argument is democratic countries don't do it. And there's a long list of evidence supporting such position. There's very few examples where two countries that practiced well maintained democratic values engaged in military conflict with one another. That doesn't necessarily mean that democratic nations don't engage in military conflict, period. Actually, they get involved quite frequently with autocratic regimes that don't become democracy and don't choose democracy as their preferred form of government. So the democratic peace theory is only really looking at democracy. Rarely is there conflict. Democracy, autocracy, especially if they're within a close range of each other, yes, there's often conflict. And then autocracy really just comes to a territorial dispute there in those circumstances. So the democratic peace theory, there's various explanations as to why it exists. The sort of more realist perspective in international scholarship says because most countries that are democracies have only been democracies since World War II, it relates more to what the conditions of the international political system were post-World War II, which was a bipolar world with two major superpowers at the time. And then into the 90s, it became just one major economic military superpower in the world. And the idea, the reference is post-World War II, the European colonies began decolonizing a lot of the developing global south. And in that process, the many of those newly independent nations chose democracy as their preferred form of governments, and thus it increased the number of democracies, and thus supporting the evidence that the democratic peace theory holds. So it comes down to how the international political system was being wired. Was it multipolar with many major superpowers? Was it bipolar with two major superpowers, or unipolar with one major superpower? But then there's another normative explanation, which is democracies have a selectorate model. Both democracies and autocracies have selectorate models, but how big those selectorates are. How big does the people seeking power have to expand their tent? How many people need to be involved in the decision to make this person the person in power? In democracies, it is a larger number. That's officially what democracy means. It's a larger number deciding who gets power. In autocracies, it's just a few institutions, typically the military and then the economic elite. Those who determine who gets power. The military and the economic wings of the nation, the manufacturing or finance, plus those who have the way of being violent in an organized form. So those are sort of the competing reasons why the democratic peace theory exists. But will it still exist? Now, there's sort of more progressive elements arguing that the world's foremost military superpower right now is moving away from democracy. It's moving towards a neo-feudalism monarchic system. I still doubt it. I think it will lead to civil war before it becomes a monarchy. I think that potentially could occur. That superpower having a civil war before it becomes an empire. There will be a civil war before it becomes an empire. It might still become an empire, but there would be a civil war before such empire existed. So taking that out of context and living in the world where it's still going to be a democracy until such civil war occurs, it is presently interested in territorial control of another democracy, and that democracy is closely linked, considered more of a colony of a European country, a European democracy. So, why is this happening? The reasoning being provided is there's a worry that the northern portion of that colony or democracy is not properly defended, and thus surrendering its sovereignty to another state will have it properly defended from potential rising superpowers that are competitors of the current superpower. However, that reasoning doesn't hold when the superpower, or when the democracy the superpower is interested in, has said, we'd welcome more of your soldiers without giving up our sovereignty. Thus, you can still defend it. You can still defend that territory without seizing its sovereignty and its self-determination. So why are you doing it? Are you trying to become an empire? Question worth asking. Thank you so much for watching. And I will definitely say thank you, and I'll see you in the next one.